Patrick and I are here today to do a short presentation on our experience on the west coast of Canada, a case study of the Great Bear Rainforest, which is a case study in collaboration and in the resolution of land use conflicts and how seemingly divergent parties can come together around a set of interests and be able to come up with, as our executive director Bruce Cox said earlier, come up with complex solutions to complex questions. So the Great Bear Rainforest, what you'll notice in that slide, in that image, that's the west coast of Canada, British Columbia. The island down on the bottom is Vancouver Island, and the island, the green island up on the top to the left of that image is Haida Gwaii, also known as the Queen Charlotte Islands. It's 64,000 square kilometers in size, 6.4 million hectares, about the size of Ireland. And it has some, globally outstanding ecological and cultural values.
Values such as the 10,000 years of cultural history of the First Nations people. And there's about 25 First Nations whose traditional territory falls within the Great Bear Rainforest. Very complex languages and variations in culture. So there's been forestry, tourism, fisheries. These values have sustained the economy throughout the region for a long period of time. In 1997, this is when I really got involved directly in the Great Bear Rainforest. I just have to share a little anecdote with you. It was in May of 1997, and I was at a place called Roderick Island, which was a place where a client of mine had tenure. And Roderick Island's in a very remote area, far north on the central coast. And it was actually, the weather was beautiful. It was unusually nice for that time of year. And I was out with my client had a logging operation going there, and I was out with the fellow they call the charge hand, he's kind of like the day-to-day foreman for the site, to look at an area where there had been a little bit of a road failure. And while we were out looking at this, there was an announcement came over the radio in his truck from one of the crew saying, there's people coming out of the forest wearing white coveralls, and they're starting to climb on our machinery, and the coveralls say Greenpeace on them. So everybody had been trained on what to do. All the workers had been. They just downed tools and they left the site, and we went there, and sure enough, the Greenpeace folks had chained themselves to the equipment. And that was the first kind of blockade in the Great Bear Rainforest. And it wasn't really aimed so much, that blockade wasn't aimed so much at the company and its activity as it was aimed directly at the marketplace, because Greenpeace's campaign was global and it was based on the marketplace. And this is where customers come into the equation big time. The market campaigns had started in British Columbia at the time of Clayoquot Sound, which was 93, 94. By the time of 97, 98, they were global in nature. There were customers in the United Kingdom and Europe, in the United States, that were either demonstrating extreme concern over what was going on in British Columbia, or were actually, in some cases, ceasing to buy products from the region. In 1999, a group of coastal forest companies got together for a two-day retreat in Parksville on Vancouver Island and said, this is not working. We're getting kicked out of town, and we need to do something different. And recognize that the status quo was not an option, and make space for discussions. Well, that meant sitting down with your adversaries. That meant sitting down with Greenpeace, with organizations like Forest Ethics, and there was Rainforest Action Network involved in those days, Natural Resources Defense Council, and a number of other groups, and actually to sit down and start having a conversation. What happened during that time is we found that we could actually, as it's put here, make space for discussions. We could actually begin a process of negotiation and de-escalation of the conflict. Why it happened was because the marketplace had been engaged and customers were saying, we want you to get your act together. There was a famous meeting, it was famous for those of us involved, in Vancouver in 1999, where the German pulp and paper makers and the German magazine publishers had just completed a 3 or 4 day tour of the Great Bear Rainforest with Greenpeace, came back to Vancouver, called all the parties into the room, environmental groups, government, industry, and said basically, we don't like what we see happening here. We think that you can both, you can all coexist. We think you can do the right thing, and we expect you to get to work on doing the right thing. Otherwise, we're going to end decades of business that we've done in this region of the world. You know, if science said this is what you should do, then that's what you would do. That was it was very important to have that science basis to planning and then ultimately decision-making. And this commitment to act on solutions. In other words, not always find roadblocks, because we were really good at doing that with each other, but actually to focus on the potential for solutions.
So all interests are represented up on the stage announcing this. And what this really signifies, I guess why I'm calling out all of this, is that everybody's standing on stage, everybody is supporting this. And it comes in when we speak a little bit later about what are some of the lessons learned from this. So the agreement's 33% protection over the whole land-based system of land management called ecosystem-based management, which is just the tip of the iceberg to a great deal of, not complexity, but a great deal of work. And that's committed to be implemented by March 31st of this year. And how that would be applied across the rest of the land base outside of those protected areas, those conservancies, is it would be applied in new and different logging practices. The agreements also highlight new First Nations and provincial government relationship. It outlines that they're going to make decisions what's going to happen on the land base together. In terms of making space for discussions to happen, Patrick spoke ably to that, was simply, it's difficult to sit down when you believe that something's at risk. And something is at risk and you're actually losing something. It's difficult to sit down and pour all of your energies into collaborative discussions while you're worried about what's happening outside of the room. And we have often talked about that as environmental groups as talk and log, so that it was very important for us not to be losing some of the ecologically key valleys in the Great Bear Rainforest while we were sitting down and talking about what a solution would look like for these same valleys that were going down.
The market played a real pivotal role in all of this, and I think going forward, it's what's going to help sustain this movement towards a more sustainable, more environmentally and socially appropriate practices on the land when it comes to these forests.